Welcome back to the Scottish Indie Music Podcast with Gareth, Perrie and Finlay Macdonald. In episode 3, we were joined by Jason Macphail, a man who has played just about every role there is to play in the Scottish indie music scene. Jason spoke to us about his experiences as a musician, band manager and promoter, his friendship with big star frontman Alex Chilton, and the merits of digital streaming services.
It froze it. You just said something really cool and then it just all froze on me. In this week's podcast, we've got none other than Jason Macphail, who is basically a bit of a legend in Scottish independent music. It's quite hard to introduce him because he is a man that's got a lot of hats, and I mean that literally as well. So, Jason, I'm going to just ask you, how would you describe what it is you do?
I suppose I'm just somebody that's just trying not to fall through the cracks of fucking normality. Just try to find some kind of way to kind of exist in the world, you know.
You can swear all you want, by the way. It's me and Gareth work in education, so it's like, we're not swearing, it's fine. Feel free to just crack.
Okay. Yeah, I just try not to go too crazy, you know. It's try to figure out ways of ducking and diving and try to get through this thing called life. Is that what Prince said, wasn't it?
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here together to get through this thing called life. Something along these lines.
Yeah, that's it. Just try to get through from A to Z. Guess you've got to make money somehow, you know.
Yeah.
Keep yourself entertained.
Well, the first time I met you was when John Hogarty and I were in the BMX Bandits and we wandered into the Griffin, in the small part of the Griffin, the Griffiny, I think it was called. Right. It was a place where a lot of people met, formed bands and all sorts of things like that. You were playing records on turntables, but the thing that was radically different from any other DJ I'd heard was that you weren't playing like that music you can dance to or anything like that. The whole point was it was quiet, actually sad songs. The club was called Teardrops, and you were playing things like Dan Penn and you were playing Scott Walker. And I remember very clearly saying, he's got Scott 4 on vinyl, which back in those days, I mean, was just incredible. You were like some kind of demigod, because it had only just come out on CD, you know. So that was amazing.
Right. I was at university, right? You know, I need to do something in my life, so I should go to university. And anyway, I did divinity, philosophy, and theology, right? Mm-hmm. And about 1 year into it, I was watching the Bells Hill Beat. I loved and continue to think the world of the Teenage Fan Club in particular. And Eugene Kelly was on it, and he'd said, well, you know, we all met in the famous Griffin Bar. And I was like, well, that's obviously what I need to do. I need to drop out of university and go and get a job in the Griffin Bar. You know, you got to get amongst it, right? Yeah. you got to get, you know, you got to immerse yourself. So you know, dropped out of university. By that point, I think it kind of, whatever the Griffin Bar was, right, in the 80s and maybe the early 90s, it had kind of finished. I just missed it. But,
me and John were still going there.
You were still going. Yeah, so we're playing records, that's right, and you and John came up. And I must have known who you guys were. Anyway, some time passed, and I went to see the BMX Bandits in Paisley, and I kind of hustled my way backstage, and I think I asked John to DJ at the Griffin. And I was like, well, you know, if I can, maybe that's the way I hustle these guys and get them find a way into show business.
Wow.
Thank you.
Because you had great T-shirts, Teardrops T-shirts, and John and I both had one each, and we did a little bit of touring at that time, and we had to sort of like arrange between ourselves who was going to wear the Teardrops T-shirt on stage, because we both wanted to wear it. You know, it was a cool T-shirt.
That's great. I didn't know that. Thanks.
The next time we kind of had any engagement, you somehow managed to get Dan Penn, legendary Memphis singer-songwriter producer who produced Big Star, Percy Sledge, goodness knows who else. You'd got him over to Glasgow and got us to be his backing band to play a gig and record some stuff as well, which was an unbelievable experience for me. And it was the first of a few, all brought on by you, which is why I kind of asked you at the start, how do you see yourself? You're kind of like a gig promoter, but also a manager, but also...
I suppose I wanted to be in a band. A lot of people who want to be in bands, you just kind of want to get involved and you want to meet people. And, it's like anybody that wants to be a musician or an artist, get a job in a bar, because that's where people congregate.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to, at some point in the evening, going to come up and want a drink. And you're going to meet everybody in the room. It is the job. I suppose, I just wanted to be a part of something, and feel excited about something. And okay, right. So I was doing the DJ thing in the Griffin, and it became apparent I was in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
I had been in the right place, but the energy had moved elsewhere, right? And energy had moved to the 13th note.
Right.
So that's where the sex people were going.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, we better go there. And when we got there, we were going to do the same thing, which was play records. And Craig Tannock, he then owned the 13th note, and he owned Stereo and Mono and 78 and that franchise of venues. Craig was great, right? And he was like, yeah, just do your thing, right? Do whatever you want to do. But it was my friend Kevin Donnelly. I'd said, who else should we get? We've had John Hogarty and Finlay DJ or whoever you said. I come in and he goes, who else? And I went, well, wouldn't it be amazing if we could get Dan Penn to DJ? And we had read about him in Sweet Soul Music, the Peter Gralnick book. In the book, Peter Gralnick had described him as the secret hero of that book. And it was all the stuff like, the Legend of Dan Penn demos were as great as any of the tracks that were then subsequently cut, whether that be Percy Sledge, James Carr, Aretha Franklin, Jimmy Hughes, so on and so forth. Anyway, I said to Kevin, why don't we get Dan Penn to DJ? And he said, why would you get Dan Penn to DJ when you could get me to play? Right?
Wow.
Of course, right? So I don't know what happened. Alcohol may have been involved, I can't remember. But for some reason, we managed to phone him in Alabama. We did it. We got there via Heavenly Records. I think it was Heavenly. We found out that he was on Sire Records in America. Mm-hmm. And we phoned Sire in New York and said, well, we're from Glasgow and we really like Dan Penn to come and play at our venue. And he said, okay, we'll give you his number, right? So we got the number and we phoned it. I can't remember if we left him a message or whatever, but we got a phone call, or his wife Linda picked up or whatever it was, and we said, would you come to Glasgow? You're the guy that wrote A Woman Left Lonely that Janis Joplin did a great version of. Mm-hmm. He said, well, as fate would have it, I've just released a new record on Sire, which I wasn't aware of, and I was like, wow. And he went, yeah, it's the first record I made in 22 years, right? And I'm going to be in London at the Royal Festival Hall to promote this record, and it's part of a kind of singer-songwriter conference that also had Joe South, Vic Chestnut, Guy Clark, and the genius that was Alan Toussaint. And he was like, come down, and if you're serious, come down with some money. Or come down with train tickets, maybe it was. I think it was maybe come down with train tickets and money for myself, my wife, and my mother-in-law. Right. And we'll come to Glasgow. And so I was like, great, let's do that, right? So it was agreed, and we were like, this is phenomenal, right? And then we came off the phone, I was talking to Kevin, well, this is going to happen, it's amazing, it's great, right? And then we realised that nobody knew who Dan was. I mean, nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. There's no internet, He doesn't have any records that are available. Nobody's ever heard him sing. Maybe yourself or Douglas might be like, oh yeah, Dan Penn, did he do the Dark End of the Street, or Do Right Man, Do Right Woman, or he had produced, or maybe people knew he'd produced a letter for Alex Chilton, So, you realise that you promised somebody £2,000 or £3,000 or whatever it was we had promised them, right? Mm-hmm. And we realised that also nobody would turn up even if it was free. Mm-hmm. Which is a fucking problem, Not only did nobody's turned up. So then it was sort of like, well, how are we going to do this? This is a fucking serious problem. So I went to bed for 2 days, demoralised. And then it kind of, we realised that it coincided with Tea in the Park, the first Tea in the Park. And Primal Scream were playing it, and we went, well, maybe we could go and ask them, and they could maybe be the band, the backing band. Because I think the gig was the night after Primal Scream played, so maybe they played on the Friday or they played on the Saturday, and the Dan Penn gig was either Saturday or Sunday, something like that, right? And we went into Alex Nightingale, who was Annie Nightingale's son, who was their manager at the time. We sent out that, would you be the band? And we thought, well, maybe we can sell the tickets on the back of the fact that Primal Scream are the band, right?
Yeah.
And they decided that they didn't want to do it. But I think they had got it wrong. I think Alex had got it wrong. I think he thought we had said, do Primal Scream want to support Dan Penn in a pub in Glasgow? And they were like, as much as we like Dan Penn, we don't want to support him. You know, and they were like, well, we'll come. So we were like, okay, well, at least that's 10 tickets sold. But at that point, I got to know Douglas. That's what it was, right? Because I'd met Douglas backstage at that gig in Paisley. And I maybe phoned Douglas and said, yeah, you know, I'm trying to figure this out. And he said, well, we could be the band. And I went, really? How do you put on a gig? I've never done it. Didn't know anybody. And he was like, well, speak to this guy called Stuart Cruikshank, and Stuart will sort it out. And so by hook or crook, you know, we sold the 100 or the 200 tickets or whatever it was, you know. And it had a lot to do with you guys, the BMX Bandits. I think the tickets had sold in the fact it was the BMX Bandits. And then everybody was trying to figure out who Dan Penn was at that point.
Oh, it was definitely rammed. I remember the show being totally rammed. And I remember Bobby Gillespie being there very clearly. He was going up and ingratiating himself to Dan.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing about them was that they said, okay, we're going to come. And I was like, okay, well, that's 10 tickets sold, right? And my friend Kevin was in the door. And it didn't make any money. You know, broke even. You know, I think we maybe paid you guys 50 quid for a van or something, right? So you didn't get paid. And all the money had gone to Dan. And I basically said, we'll give you every penny that's made on the door, right? We won't make any money, right? So I can't remember what it was, whether it was like £1,400, £1,000 or whatever it was, we'd agreed to pay him, right? And Bobby and Andrew and Robert and their entourage all walked in and didn't pay, which becomes a problem when 10 people don't pay. And, you know, they get 100 people at the show, or 200 people at the show, right? And I was like, Kevin, what the fuck? You know, what the fuck? And he's like, yeah, they just kind of like, it was like they just walked in, and it was like, I didn't know, and it was like, they didn't think they needed to pay. And I was like, they need to pay. And then he was like, right, okay, well, I screwed up. I'll pay for it personally. And I was like, no, you can't fucking do that. You're not paying for it personally. Let me figure this out. So I saw Bobby and I went up and said, Bob, listen, you guys were really meant to pay, you know? And he's like, all right, man, right, sorry, all right, okay. Speak to Alex, and Alex will sort it. And I was like, oh, all right, okay, right. So I got to Nightingale and I'm like, Alex, Bob said that you'll sort this. And he looked at me and he went, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you've all just walked in and it's like, we're not making any money here, and we need to pay this guy. I'm not buying your ticket because you just played Tea in the Park last night. And he's like, so what do you want me to do? And I was like, well, I want you to pay. And he went, I don't have any money. And I was like, well, there's an ATM across the road. So he kind of went out and watched him go across to the ATM at Glasgow Street, right? And he sat and he looked at the machine, at which point he jumped up and he karate kicked the fucking machine. He just jumped up and kicked the machine. I was like, what? And then he just walked off. And I was like, damn. So anyway, so I go back to Bob and I'm like, Bob, yeah, Alex just went out and karate kicked an ATM machine and he walked into the night. I was like, well, can you just pay? And he was like, how much are the tickets? And I was like, just say they were £10. I was like, they're £10, right? And he's like, right. So he's kind of rummaging through his pocket. And he went, and I went, this place is like rammed full of people, right? You've got 10 of your friends. Do I really need to go around them all trying to get £10 off of everybody? And I'm like, because it's going to ruin my night. And he was like, right. And I was like, so can you just pay for your pals? And he was like, how many of them? And I was like, there's 10 of you. And he's like, right. And you see him try to do the mental math, right? And he's like, right. And there was some random person standing next to him, and he went, leaned over and I'll got £100. And he was like, right. I got £100 out of Bobby. That was that.
That's absolutely classic.
That was that.
Amazing. I did not expect that at all.
You've just described the Finlay where you first got involved in music, but I wanted to know what you were like as a younger person, maybe in your childhood and as a teenager, and what kind of influences, where your love of music came from, and who were your heroes at that time as well. So maybe younger heroes, so people that had a very early impression on you, and then how that developed throughout your teenage years and beyond as well.
On reflection, I'd always been around music because my dad played a lot of music in the house, and things like, I can't remember, 4 years old and like putting on the Muppets, which is still a great record. And the first couple of Beatles albums, just like everybody else, had them, the red and blue Beatles albums. In my bedroom, there was a dresser, with a mirror in it. And there was a little kind of glass shelf at the back. Like my mind when I was 5 years old, that was a drum riser. So I'd somehow managed to make like a drum kit and had like a little kind of toys and like Ringo Starr and all that kind of business. You kind of went from there to Adam Ant. I really like Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. I'd gone to see Simple Minds at Ibrox. It was the first gig I ever went to in 1986, 85, 86. Simple Minds had played Ibrox in the back of that massive selling record Once Upon a Time. And I must have liked them, and my dad took me. And the support bands were like The Cult and Lloyd Cole and the Commotions and the Waterboys. And so it was quite exciting, So I went out and bought Fisherman's Blues by the Waterboys and Lloyd Cole and the Commotions records. And I remember being really, really excited about Mainstream coming out because they played songs from Mainstream, but I don't know if those records particularly hold up, but there was something really exciting about Lloyd Cole, I think.
I totally loved Lloyd Cole and the Commotions. I had Rattlesnakes on one side of a cassette and the Smiths' first album on the other side of a cassette, both taped off my cousin. When you put two cassette players together, you press record on one and the mic gets picked up by the speaker. So that was how I had these two. I'll never forget having that cassette. It was a very, very special thing to me, I love Rattlesnakes to this day. It's a classic.
I don't think they're really thought of as being a cool band. Not in the way that Orange Juice or like Joseph K or any of that stuff that people kind of think, oh, that's cool. In a lot of ways, I think they're more kind of like piled in with things like Love and Money, and but maybe like Delamitri is maybe more that than the postcard thing.
Probably they had strings on the first album, didn't they? They had a string section, which was amazing and so well done. But it was quite a mainstream sound, which was a bit different from the kind of indie postcard thing, wasn't
it? Two kind of godlike characters, Stuart Murdoch, right, and Lawrence from Felt. If they say they like something, it's like, how people are going to listen, right?
Yeah.
In 1996, 1997, I was in the Grosvenor Cafe and I met Stuart. I can't remember if I knew. I think I did know him at this point. And I said, what have you been doing? And he said, I'm trying to get a band together. And I've just been around putting up wanted ads looking for musicians. And he went, yeah, I went to Lost in Music, and various other retail establishments and tried to, put up a little thing saying musicians wanted. And I said, okay. And I said, show me your thing. And I said, what's your influences? And it just said Rattlesnakes. That was it. It just said Rattlesnakes. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting now. So that was actually for Stuart, Rattlesnakes. Probably people don't know that about Stuart, right? And I was like, well, that's great, right? Years down the line, I was with Lawrence from Felt. Yeah, I don't know how it came up. But it did, right? And we were talking about, it would have been about producers, right? And I was like, who would you like to produce a record? And I went, no, I wouldn't want to produce it. I don't want anybody to produce my records. No. Apart from Paul Hardiman. And I was like, Paul Hardiman? And he went, yeah. And I went, what did he do again? And he went, Rattlesnakes by Lloyd Cole and the Commotions and Lloyd Cole's solo album. And he loved Rattlesnakes. Lawrence loved Rattlesnakes. Even more than he loved Rattlesnakes, he loved the first solo Lloyd Cole record. And he was almost like, if anybody was going to give him a budget to do something, it would be Paul Hardiman. Paul Hardiman probably hasn't made a record since 1991. He said, yeah, when we saw Lloyd Cole on Top of Pops doing Perfect Skin, it was a kind of road to Damascus moment. And he said he knew that Felt needed to up their game. And he says, we needed to up our game and we needed something that was going to allow us to compete. Because he saw Lloyd Cole as the kind of place that he thought, that's where we've got to be. We've got to be that good and we've got to be sophisticated. And he said that was the point at which having seen Blair Cowan play the Hammond organ.
Right. Wow.
We need a Hammond organ player, and enter Martin Duffy. Mm-hmm. So Martin Duffy came into Felt on the back of the fact that he felt needed to be doing something similar to Local and Commotions. I don't think people know that.
That's amazing. Felt are considered the most ultra cool 80s indie band ever. And it's partly to do with the fact that they never really got the success they deserved and stuff. But another thing that I think there was a time when Lawrence, you were working with Lawrence for that Go-Kart Mozart gig in the Poetry Club a few years back. And I don't know, somebody said, it may have been you, he was really into the Win album. In fact, it was in his Q&A. He did a Q&A and he said he noted, like Win, the album by Win. It was a really big album. It was like used on adverts and everything. But that was another one that surprised me.
I think it was big in Scotland. I don't know if it was big in England. I think it was one of those records, on the back of the fact that, it's Tenants.
Well, I associate that with like major corporation stuff. And I was surprised that he really rated Win so much, I know like Davy Henderson came from the Fire Engines and all that sort of stuff, but yeah.
Davy did the interview that night, which was a car crash.
A wee bit, I remember that, yeah. It was kind of more about Davy than it was about Lawrence.
Yeah, Davy, which is kind of like, well, what were we fucking expecting? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But like, it was kind of amusing, Yeah. But I really like Lawrence. I really like Go-Kart Mozart a lot.
Me too.
I don't care about Felt.
I do love Felt. I have to say, I think they're a spectacular band, and I still really love them. I really like Go-Kart Mozart. Well, that show was incredible. It was just dynamite.
It was. It fucking was. Can I give you a wee bit of insight into that gig, right? See when we used to do it, right? Between agreeing the gig and the gig happening, his guitar player fell by the wayside. And he was like, my guitar players feel bad. I don't know what I'm going to do. We could do the gig. And I was like, why the fuck do you need a guitar player? Do you need a guitar player? And he was like,
incredible, because I thought that was a conscious decision. I thought that was the whole thing with Go-Kart Mozart. They just didn't have guitars. And it was like a really conscious thing.
It was one of these things that, like, on record, sure, right? But when they were out playing live, it kind of did what most people do. It was like, oh, well, we'll need some guy playing a Les Paul, playing like Steve Jones. And it's always horrible. It's never good. That chugging Les Paul thing, Mm-hmm. I was quite happy with myself because I was like, I would like to hear this without the chugging Les Paul thing.
I did not know that was you, and that was your decision. That is fantastic.
I'm really weird about guitar players. I don't really like guitar players. So, for a start, that rhythm section is phenomenal. That guy, Rusty and Ralph. You can make it up, right? And Perrie is such a great keyboard player. They don't need a guitar player. He's, his hands are all over the place. He's like Rick Wakeman, And I think he just allowed the songs to shine through without that kind of it's like, fucking shut the fuck up. I hate that. He's just like, and it just kind of, you hear the songs. It was, I don't know if you would call it pop, but it was a kind of pop sensibility to it. And it kind of like, the songs kind of really come to life. And they're fun and they're light-hearted and they float and it was wonderful. Anyway, I was really fucking glad that I managed to persuade them that they didn't need a guitar.
Yeah, Jason, I know that you've managed a few bands as well over the years. So I just wanted to ask you a bit about that. First of all, which bands you managed, if there's any that you maybe think didn't quite get to the level they deserved as well. But also, I know you've secured a number of record deals for bands as well. What's your approach to that? Like, what do you think they look for when you're approaching a label? How do you sell the band?
Turn up ready. It's turn up ready. It's like one of the problems I think with like the internet and social media and all that kind of stuff is kids are so fucking eager just to get their shit out there, and it's usually shit. It's very difficult to say to people, this stuff you're doing is no good. Stop, get better. And in a way, that was an advantage to, I think, putting records out pre-internet. Nobody saw you do your dirty work in public. And also, if you're privileged enough to get like the backing of a record label, and some level, if they're going to give you money, they get involved, and that's maybe not such a bad thing. because I've done it before with varying degrees of success. They can give you some kind of like, well, what, you know, you've working with Paul Harding or whoever it is, you know. But anyway, the point is, you know, it's like you just hear the people and they're like, oh, you know, it's hard. It's hard. You're like, well, fuck off and do something else then. You're obviously not meant to do this, you know. Yeah, it's hard. It's meant to be hard. It's an incredibly competitive environment, you know. It's an incredibly competitive environment, you know. And it's like, oh, you know, nobody's getting record deals. Yes, they are. It's harder for us now than it was for you. And you're like, no, it's not. Being real about it, you know. It's like when I put records out with Domino like 20 years ago, they had the year that we put records out, the company had a turnover of £1 million for the first time. They've now got a turnover of £70 million. They're thriving. They're all still there. You know, they're all still drawing wage.
They're constantly being told there's no money in the record industry anymore.
It's nonsense. If there's no money in the record business, why are Rough Trade Records still in business? Why are Domino's thriving if there's no money in the... Of course there's fucking money in the music business. These people are doing well and they're selling records or they're selling music. It's just a nonsense. It's kind of an excuse for people who just can't get it together. You know, is it competitive? Yeah. You know, but yeah, of course fucking people are still getting record deals. You know, that's a great thing.
I mean, okay, that's an interesting point you're on there, because there's a lot of talk right now about how Spotify and some others are ripping everybody off. And some people think, well, it's the record companies are ripping everybody off, or it's Spotify that's ripping everybody off. Is MD ripping MD off, or is it just the same as it always was?
My feeling is that it's probably just as it always was. There's people, you know, who are probably making tons of money. There's probably people who are not making as much money as they should be making. And, you know, I don't want to be negative about it. It's fine, you know, but it's just like, they're not your friends, that's for sure. If you're signing a record deal with somebody and you're shitting, shaking your hands and they buy a bottle of champagne to make you feel special, and the minute you're signing that contract, there's somebody in the back room who's been instructed to fuck you as many ways as they possibly can to make sure that they don't pay you. But it's okay. It's fine, you know. It's like, what does it matter? Yeah. You know, is it going to stop you from doing it? If you want to do it, you just do it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You know, you might make some money, you might not make money. It's life.
Well, that's a good contribution to the ongoing debate on that front, I think.
The band that I wish I had worked with, right? And I didn't push hard enough for it, and I should have, because not only are they a great band, it would have made tons of money, was Vampire Weekend. Mm-hmm. They turned up ready. That was an amazing thing to watch. It's somebody, you know, somebody's kind of made records and somebody that's managed bands. They were just phenomenal. Mm. They just turned up. They had a record that was ready. It was finished. They had promoted it themselves. They had taken advantage of MySpace and all of that kind of business and created an excitement around themselves. They would look great photographs, but most importantly, a great record. It doesn't happen very often, you know. It's like,
well, Franz Ferdinand were another one like that, weren't they? They made their album completely bang before they'd sign a deal or anything.
I mean, I've known Alex a long time, and we worked together on 13th Note, actually, behind the bar, with a studio together at one point. Alex turned up ready, but he had a record contract and it hadn't worked out. Yeah. So it was his second shot at it. He just got it right. He's really industrious.
He knew how it worked. Yeah.
It was the right thing at the right time and all that kind of business. And they've made a couple of really, really amazing singles.
Now, just to go back to that one, can you maybe just say some of the other bands that you've worked with as well over the years?
It was the first band I managed, but was my own.
Was it E-Twin? Yeah.
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 Somehow managed to kind of squeak it through and get somebody to give us some money to do a thing, and fucked it up, which is fine. And then Michael, who was the drummer in my band, ended up getting a fun band together. And that fun band, it became apparent, were pretty good, really good actually. And I was working with Alan McGee very, very briefly, and he didn't want to sign them. And Jeff Travis did. And they sent to Rough Trade really quickly for quite a lot of money.
That's the 1990s you're talking about there, Jason.
You know, I was like, well, this is kind of fun too, you know. Mm-hmm. Andrew Oldham who I'd spent some time with, he was like, so how are you enjoying managing bands? And I was like, well, what's the fucking difference? Being in a band, managing bands, it's ultimately the same thing. And he was like, thank you for saying that. Because it's, you know, it's fun. And then I ended up managing a French band called the Teenagers, who were great. Who were really, really, really great. And then worked with a couple of bands. CSS, I kind of was involved with the Amazing Snakeheads. And trying to think if there's anybody else. Then Royal Trucks. Then finally Royal Trucks. I mean, it's like, that's 10 podcasts in itself, right? It's like, after 19 years of not speaking to each other, that's Jennifer and Neil, as a couple who had divorced, and somebody had offered them $60,000 to do a gig, and they were like, what, $60,000? And somebody said, well, it's all about the money now. And I was like, well, it's always been about the money with those guys. And anyway, they got it together, and they had an American manager, this guy called Paul Bean, who's based in Malibu. And I was like, okay, well, Paul's doing it. And I was speaking to Jennifer, and I think, I don't really know what happened, but she came and she said, would you manage the band in Europe? And I was like, okay. Not really expecting anything, right? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then it became apparent that one day she just got in touch and said, by the way, we're firing Paul. And I was like, oh, right. No, I haven't met Paul, you know, I was like, Skype phone calls, you know. I was like, why firing him? She's like, I don't know. He's needy. Right, okay. So I was like, right. So it was just kind of skullduggery, which is kind of quite fascinating to watch, you know. Kind of ugly, but kind of still fascinating, you know. And so Paul was on his way out, and the record label were just fucking insane. There was nobody involved in the project that was remotely fucking approaching anything near sanity. Nobody. Everybody was fucking genuinely certifiable. You know, I still genuinely believe they are the greatest band since the Velvet Underground. You know, there's nobody really has pushed the possibilities of what that particular art form is more than Royal Trucks. Mm-hmm. Rock and roll, which is something that doesn't really exist anymore. They somehow managed to kind of wring something out of a cloth that dried up a long time ago, you know.
They've got that kind of thing that the New York Dolls have got, and I suppose the Velvet Underground Lou Reed thing, where it just seems it's genuine and it's coming directly out of their, you know, out of their soul or something.
No,
but is it complete artifice? I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It is complete artifice, and it's also, I mean, Neil, he's the greatest guitar player of his generation, according to Jay Mascis. Now, we know that guy's a good guitar player, Jay Mascis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, here's the interesting thing, right? When we were making the record, what became the last Royal Trucks record, right? We were in Los Angeles, and I've been in recording studios, you know, whether it be like, you know, 4 tracks or like smaller setups, bigger setups, being in Abbey Road, you know, little mountain studios where like on the desk at Aerosmith recorded on. My point is, yeah, I kind of get studios, and I've been in various kind of studio setups, right? It's the only time in my life I've ever been in a studio and had no fucking concept of what was going on. The first couple of days was really great. And me and Jennifer turned around one day and she said, oh, by the way, Kim Gordon and Jay Mascis are coming by tomorrow or the day after. And I was like, to hang out? And she was like, no, they're coming. They're going to kind of like put some stuff down in the record. She went, yeah, Jay's really excited because he's like, Neil's the greatest guitar player. Jay just is like, nobody's greater than Neil, right? And I'm like, well, that's true. Out of curiosity, what's Kim Gordon doing? She went, Kim's just wanting to hang out. We'll get her to do something. She'll do something. I don't know what. We'll give her some backing vocals to do or something, right? And I was just kind of sitting there and like going, that sounds stupid. Why the fuck would you put Kim Gordon on this record? And out of curiosity, why would you put Jay Mascis on it? And she was like, well, Jay's like, you know, Jay just likes Neil. And I was like, how does Neil feel about it? And she's like, he goes, Neil doesn't care. Surely if you put Jay Mascis on this record, it's just less Neil. You know, it's like, if you're not adding, you're detracting. So why have Jay Mascis on this record? What's the point? Surely the thing you want on it's just more Royal Trucks. And she was like, you know what, you're right. So in that moment, Jay Mascis was taken off the record, and so was Kim Gordon. And you go, good.
Absolutely brilliant. I'm just so impressed, Jason, that you were able to go in there with balls of steel like that. I could never say something like that to somebody like that. You know, honestly, I don't think I could. I wanted to ask you, I think we need to talk about Alex Chilton at some point in this conversation. You got Teenage Fan Club to back up Alex Chilton in the 13th Note. And then you became basically lifelong friends with Alex, didn't you? You came over and a lot after that. You went over to New Orleans. What was your kind of overriding memory? What was your best sort of memory of Alex? That's maybe the best question I can ask about that.
Can I ask you a question first? When did you first meet him? Did you have a flat in Ruskin Terrace?
Yeah. That's my kind of big Alex Chilton story. It was when Big Star reformed in '93 and they played the QM Union. Somebody got BMX Bandits to support them, and Alex and the guys from the Posies, and they put together a band to do the Big Star stuff, and it was absolutely incredible. They were brilliant. You probably remember seeing them.
Yeah, I was at that gig.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was amazing. But what really amazing after that was like I lived in Ruskin Terrace, which is like, I know you lived in Ruskin Terrace or thereabouts not long after that as well. But they've got these amazing big front rooms, and we swapped rooms, and I was in the big front rooms. I was like, we can get people back to my flat. It's not far. Got a big front room. It's a nice place. Alex came back. The Posies came back. BMX Bandits, but then also half of Glasgow seemed to come back as well. And there's a lot of things I could say about that night, but Alex played some songs on the guitar and sang the most incredible version of This Guy's in Love With You I've ever heard, which, like, sure. How would they describe it? His charisma, incredible charisma when he performed, and sitting right next to him like that was amazing. And it was so dynamic the way he performed it as well. But that was cool. And also, one of my memories of that night was Joe McAlinden said near the end of the night, once most people had left, he goes, see, when you have a party, you know, what I would usually do is just sort of invite a few people back, you know, not like everybody. And then Alex asked Joe, when were you born? And Joe said whatever it was. And he went, you're a fire horse, you know.
Right.
Because Alex was really into astrology, and he was into Chinese astrology and everything. And that's what he said. Well, that's typical. That's a fire horse would say.
Yeah, I remember once asking him about that, right? And there was this book. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I think it's called Sacred Symbols of the Ancients, and it's a book whereby, you know, every birth date correlates to a card in a deck of cards, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm the 5th of October, which would make me a 4 of diamonds, right? I can't remember what his card was, but he knew the relationships between all the cards and all of that kind of stuff, and whether you were compatible or not so much. So I remember once saying to him, I went, I'm not usually that eloquent, right? But it was one of those moments where I just managed to kind of like say what I wanted to say without being so fucking woolly, right? I said, it's not like you live by this. It's just, you just use it as a loose guide to navigate people. And he went, yeah. But he wasn't it. And he would do that weird thing whereby if you were like a 7 of clubs or a 2 of spades or whatever it was, he'd be like, you and I are not going to get on. And it was weird to me, man, right? Because in a lot of ways, like, he was so down to earth. And I always think Alex has been a really grounded person. Incredibly grounded, very, very precise, very practical, and not particularly ethereal. But then he had this thing that he would fuck around with, you know? I think I was quite lucky that I got to know him during probably what were the happiest years of his life.
Yeah. Right.
So that was cool.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like
he'd come back, he'd got rid of his financial worries and all that kind of stuff, hadn't he? And he knew. Did he get married at that point?
No, not at that point. But he'd managed to kind of stabilise a lot of stuff in his life. Do you know what I mean? And he wasn't drinking, which is great, and all of that kind of stuff. And he had a house that he liked, and he had a career that worked for him. You know, he just kind of knew how to kind of like navigate And he kind of really had a good handle on what life was about, I think. You know, I mean, he was a deeply, deeply, deeply strange dude, you know, but at the same time, that's all right.
Yeah. It seems to me like he would say exactly what he thought, didn't he? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think for the most part that's true, you know, and he would just be so to the point. And when you realise it wasn't really meant with any kind of sense of badness, he just, you know, he don't take it personally or whatever it was. I'm sure I pissed him off at various points. I know I did, but, you know, he probably pissed me off a couple of times as well, you know, but he's probably the person I miss more than anybody else.
Mm.
And I don't particularly miss him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, apart from the fact, you know, the first time I met him was at that gig that you were talking about, the QMU gig, because after that I was a kid when I would get my concert ticket signed. Remember one time he phoned me up, right, and he was fucking clearly stoned, right?
Mm-hmm.
I pick up the phone, right, and I'm like, hello? And then he's like, there's a lull, and he went, hey. And I went, all right, how's it going? And then there's a lull. Not bad. And I was like, that's good. And he's like, how are you? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm really good. Thank you. Right. So what have you been up to? Nah, a whole bunch of nothing. Right. And I was like, okay. And then there was a lull. Right. And I was like, he's stoned. He's been smoking too much grass. Right. And I just thought, I don't want to fucking work too hard on this call. I don't want to work too hard. And I went, it's fucking a long time, right? And I was like, I'm not doing this, man, right? I'm not fucking you phone me. You know, I was like, and it was like a fucking 20-second lull, which is a long time. And eventually it was like, right, so we'll pick this up another time. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, let's pick it up another time. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, fucking hell, man. You know, but you know, but for the most part, it wasn't like that, you know. But you know, it was really fun. I remember one time he phoned me up, and it was like 9 a.m, right? And I picked up the phone, and he was like, "Is it 9 a.m?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." And he went, "You know, I've been up all night, and I didn't want to phone you too early in the morning, so I've been up all night, just waiting to call you." And I was like, "All right, okay." And he goes, "Can you talk?" And I went, Yeah, I can talk. It's fine, I can talk. I'm just waking up while you're talking to me, right? It's 9 a.m. And he goes, do you know the soul singer Billy Ocean? And I went, yeah, I know Billy Ocean. Not personally, but yeah, I know Billy Ocean. And he went, yeah. He goes, I heard the song, you know, it's like, he's great. And I was like, yeah. And he went, do you know the song Love Really Hurts Without You? And I was like, yeah. And he went, it's so great. Okay, hold on, right? And he goes away, and then he gets the guitar, and he goes, and he goes, and he's drumming on the guitar, right? And he goes, you're running around town like a fool, and you think that it's groovy. You're giving it to some of a guy who gives you the eye. You don't give nothing to me. And then he goes, you don't give nothing to me. And then you just like bust into hysterics. And I was just like, I was like, and he's like, okay, listen. And he goes away again, and he goes, you run around town like a fool, and you think that it's groovy. You're giving it to some other guy who gives you the eye. You don't give nothing to me. And then he would bust into hysterics again. He goes, you don't give nothing to me. And I was like, at which point I start laughing, and I'm like, yeah. And he goes, wow. At which point I was in fucking hysterics as well, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great song. That's all the phone call was.
Amazing.
Which was fun. I did I remember phoning up one time, right, from a recording studio. We'd watched The Harder They Come, the Jimmy Cliff film together.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about it's just fucking incredible, right? Mm. And we watched it together, and we were smoking grass, right? And it was like fucking hilarious. It's an amazing film, right? And one day I phoned him up and I was like, listen, man, I just like heard this really elite Jimmy Cliff track. I just want to sing you it down the phone. And he was like, go. It goes like this. Your mom is Jamaica. Your mom is Jamaica. Your mom is Jamaica. I'm crowning you myself. Right? And he was going, I'm crowning you myself. And then I put him in one, and that was the way it worked, you know.
Sorry, I'm getting an impression that these were like, he felt that these were just amazing payoff lines in a song. That's so amazing. I wish I'd written that. Something like, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I kind of get it. You know, he was of opinion. He was just like, Big Star are not a great band. Don't be silly. I can't have this stupid conversation with you. I mean, sure. I mean, he did recognise it was the band that he'd been in, but I think he was also like, look, if we're going to have a conversation about music, which I'm happy to do, let's have one that's based in something approaching reality. The Beach Boys are a great band. If we want to talk about music, let's talk about the Beach Boys, but I can't really have this nonsense conversation that Big Star were a great band because they weren't. And he was right. They weren't a great band, I don't think.
A lot of people, including myself, went really over the top about them, but it was partly because they didn't get the recognition in their lifetime at all, that anywhere near they should have got. So that just inflates them in people's imagination beyond how good they actually were, you know.
Those records are narcissistic records. I think he was like kind of embarrassed by them from that point of view. It's just like, well, that's what it is. You know, it's like records and they're not particularly good, I'm unhappy records. Whereas like Flies and Sherbert, he was like, it could go, that was a good record. He knows that was a good record, and he will, but that wasn't a good record. You know, he knew what wasn't good.
I think he thought September Girls was a good record, and he thought In the Street was a good record, as far as I remember. But the rest of them, he was writing off a lot of songs, just thinking, it was just wasn't very good. Can you remember what he thought of September Girls? Does he think it's as good as everybody else thinks it is?
No, I think he thought it was good. I don't think he thought it was as good as everybody else thought it was, you know. I mean, I think he probably thought Hey Little Child was a better record, or like Bangkok was a better record, or My Rival was a better record, or Rock Hard was a better record, you know.
I was thinking about No Sex the other day there, because I played it I had this radio show on Celtic Music Radio, and I played it, and then I forgot that it's got a big, massive swear word in the middle of it. I allowed the episode to go out again a few weeks later, completely forgetting. But it shows I obviously had no audience because I didn't get any complaints about it at all. But there's a line in it that goes like, hey baby, fuck me and die. But the thing I was thinking about that record is it was all about AIDS, wasn't it? And it was quite ahead of the curve. Nobody was writing about that at the time he wrote it.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of, you know, a contrarian. He was kind of fearless, and he also thought it was, part of him probably thought it would be a hit because it was topical.
Yeah.
Who fucking knows? Do you know what I mean? But it's like, I know they didn't really like that record very much.
A lot of talk about the AIDS thing because of that It's a Sin that's been on recently, which is brilliant. How nobody was talking about AIDS, apart from the gay community, until people started to realise that it was affected everybody else as well. But I just thought it was kind of cool that Alex wrote a song about it, you know.
I kind of think about him a lot, you know. Can I tell you my favourite Alex story, right? 5 years after he died, I was in his house in New Orleans. I just went over. It's a great city, right? It wasn't strange being in his house, having the keys and just being there and riding his bike, going around the city, you know, using his kettle, sleeping in his bed, you know. One day I was kind of like just standing on the porch, right? And it was a weird thing happened, right? It was a helicopter flew down the street really low. And it was a civilian helicopter, and the door was open, the side door was open, right? And there was just somebody hanging off, fucking sitting on the edge of the helicopter, with their legs dangling out the helicopter, and there was a boombox playing music, playing like New Orleans hip hop, right? I don't know if it was like Lil Wayne or somebody, who fucking knows, right? It was weird as fuck, right? And there was this kid across the way, and he was brushing out his stoop, he's brushing the porch out, and we kind of made eye contact, and we both looked at each other, and that was it. Anyway, but an hour later or something like that, Laura, Alex's wife, shouted over at the kid. She went, "How you doing, Damien?" And he waved over, and he came over, and I was like, that helicopter thing was so fucking nuts, right? And he was like, yeah, that was really weird, right? So we started talking, and it's in Tremé, which is a kind of, Tremé is supposedly the birthplace of jazz. Supposedly, Dr. John was born there, Louis Prima and all these people. Anyway, the kid was like, all right, did you know Mr. Alex? Right? And they all called him Mr. Alex because they all had this kind of respect for him, right? He's young. And he'd be like, oh, you knew Mr. Alex? And I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I really like Mr. Alex. You know, I miss him. I think he was a musician. And I went, yeah, he was a musician. She goes, yeah. He goes, I think because I would see him, he would have a guitar case. You know, I think he was a musician. We used to hang out. And I was like, oh, that's great. He goes, yeah, when I was a kid, or like 11 or 12 years old or whatever, he goes, he used to come over and bring round some Coca-Cola and we would sit in the back porch and he would fix the punctures on my bike. I was like, what a fucking cool guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It wasn't like he was sitting going, by the way, I'm this guy that was in this famous band, you know. He just was like, do you want to have a Coke? You get some punctures I can fix in your bike.
Wow.
And that was his thing. And that was why he was fucking cool. That's why he was really great.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was it. You know, and he just had this fucking incredible ability to just be with people. And he also found it very difficult to be with people. But when he could be with people, he was really great at it. And it was always just this very kind of like, what do you do? Tell me what your story is, you know. And, you know, and Laura would say, you know, he was forever just stopping and talking to people that were homeless or whatever it was and giving them money. He just kind of got it, you know.
Yeah.
There was one thing I just wanted to ask you as well, Jason, about kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier on about, we got onto Spotify for a minute there. Now, especially amongst my friends, there's a bit of a taboo about Spotify and almost a bit of a guilt about using it. But I know from speaking to you, and I agree with you actually, that it's the now, it's the future. We've got to embrace it somehow and find a way to make it work. How do you see it working going forward?
Spotify?
Or just, not Spotify in particular, but streaming services.
Streaming.
I mean, fucking thank God for streaming services. You know? Thank God it happened. I mean, historically, major record labels have always been very, very reluctant to kind of like get with what's coming next. You know, they always fight what's coming next. Radio, fuck no, radio's going to ruin everything, you know, or cassettes are going to ruin everything, you know, or, you know, home taping's going to ruin everything, you know. It doesn't. It's a capitalist business. I like that. I mean, I consider myself a socialist, but I mean, if you're going to be a capitalist and do it right, and it is pure fucking capitalism, you know. It eventually just finds a way and, you know, it fights against stuff. But I think the problem was these people, they were just like, we're making all this money. We don't want to, we stopped selling CDs in the 90s when it was so, the music business was doing so well. And they were like, what the fuck do we do? You know, and it's just like, well, it's here. So they were so slow to embrace it and to figure it out and to monetize it. I think Napster, kids get used to getting music for free, because the record business just never learns its fucking lessons and was like, no, we'll sue these kids and we'll do this and we'll do that. You can't fight this stuff. It's like trying to push fucking treacle up a hill. You can't do it. And also, they did it right. You know, it's just like, make it easy for people. How does it work? Make it easy for people. You know, put it on their phones, I don't miss records. Who the fuck wants to use records? You know what I mean? I'm not a record person.
Yeah, I know you've spoken about that before, about the environmental impact of all these vinyl records that are being pressed as well.
It's not like I really care about it, but it's just like, oddly enough, I can go back to Alex for that one. The last time I bought a record was 1996.
96, yeah.
25 years ago. It was the only way you could get a copy. I had a copy of the record by the soul singer Oscar Tony Jr., right? I mean, Alex came over and he was like, my God, you've got Oscar Tony Jr. It's the same band that played in all the box top stuff. It's the same band that played in Dusty in Memphis, right?
Wow.
It's American. It was made at American studios in Memphis. So it's got the same band. Tommy Cogbill plays bass and Reggie Young plays guitar. Gene Christman plays drums. Same as Son of a Preacher Man, right? Same as Cry Like a Baby. Same as Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. Same as Suspicious Minds by Elvis. It's the same band, right?
Yeah.
And Oscar had made this record. Box Tops was Studio A, Oscar was in Studio B. He only made one record, and it's probably the best soul record I can think, southern soul record I can think of, because soul records are generally patchy. And he does a great version of The Dark End of the Street on it. It's not as good as the James Carr version, but it's a good one. Alex was like, man, that's fucking Oscar Tony Jr., right? And he was really jazzed about this, and he was like, how the fuck do you have this record? And I was like, and Sarah had the record, Martin had the record as well, and I think he found it funny that we had this record, Oscar Tony Jr. for Your Precious Love. Anyway, weirdly, the record I had was signed by Oscar. I don't know how that happened. I had a signed copy of this record, but I did. And anyway, at the end of his stay, I was like, listen, man, I've got a present for you. And I gave him it, and he went, oh, no. He goes, I don't want your Oscar Tony Jr. record. You got a cassette player, put it in a cassette. There's a D90. But you can have the vinyl. And he's like, look, he goes, that's kind of you. I need to put it in my suitcase. It'll get broken or fucking bent or bashed, or I'll get fucked up in transit. And I was a bit deflated, right? Because I wanted to give him this thing, right? And I'll mail it to you. And he went, oh, no. Then you need to go and you need to get like the brown mailer envelopes and put it in. You need to go to the post office. You need to send it. It'll cost you money. I won't be at home. Then I'll have to go to the post office to get it. And he went, just put it in a cassette, put it on a D90. And I was like, but do you not want the vinyl copy of the album? And he kind of lost his patience with me at that point. He goes, what the fuck do you think I want to do with it? I only want to listen to it. And I was like, yeah. And it always stuck me as being like, people fetishize this stuff, and it's like, I only want to listen to it. And you're like, if the coolest guy in the world doesn't need vinyl records, I don't need them either. And that was the moment I just kind of was like, well, you know what? I only want to listen to it. I had thousands of records. It was maybe about 7 years ago or something. I was like, I can have tons of records and an okay hi-fi, or I can get rid of all the records and have an amazing hi-fi. But I know people who've got like record collections that are 50 grand, £50,000, £100,000 are spent on their records easily, right? People we know. They've got a fucking mortgage, but they've got another room put on their house in the West End just to put their fucking records in. It's insanity. You know, it's insanity. Not only you get £100,000 worth of records, you've added another 40 grand in your mortgage to fucking store this shit. It makes no sense, you know. So anyway, so I went out, spent £6,000 on a second-hand hi-fi, which is a lot of money. It's a Lynn hi-fi, and it's like, I don't know how much it's new, £20,000 or something. It's great. It's really good. And I got Tidal. So, you know, so you're streaming like 24-bit master audio, £20 a month, and you just get master quality music where, you know, Sketches in Spain by Miles Davis or whatever. And there's more music, and you don't have all this crap lying around your house. Why the fuck would people fucking buy records? It's absolute fucking stupidity. I'm not attached to it, which I'm quite happy about, and I don't want to be attached to stuff, do you know what I mean? You buy records, don't you?
To be honest, I don't buy too many.
Yeah.
No, especially recently. But I do, I'm not totally against them. Like, I quite like them, but I think the environmental argument is something
I rarely buy records. If it's something really special, I will buy it. I want to have that thing. I like the experience that people talk about. I actually do like that experience. I got my turntable set up again last week, actually, and just sitting late at night, me and Mary just sticking on a record. It's something really nice about it. I don't have to have everything on vinyl or buy the latest thing on vinyl. You know, I use streaming. That's kind of what I do. You know?
I did the same thing. I've got a Lynn Sondek, which is a good record player. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have 100 vinyl records that are my favourite records ever. If I want to have that vinyl experience of putting on a vinyl, a record,
yeah,
you know, so like
just the absolute classics, the absolute things you can't live without.
All the records that I bought when I was a kid that were dead expensive that I can't get rid of, like Dan Penn's album that I spent £100 on in 1994, or a James Carr record that I spent £100 on 25 years ago, Big Star records that were 50. Yeah, so or something like the John Phillips record, right? Mm-hmm. And I've got them, and I sit and then you put them on, you go, that's very good, and sit and you listen to it, and then I sit and go, and as great as our Lynn Sondek is, and it's a great record player, it still sounds better on the streamer. So I'm like, what? It makes no fucking sense to sit and listen to something on vinyl when the streamer just sounds better. It just does. The whole format thing is that it's a nonsense conversation. You know, oh, vinyl sounds better than digital. It's a nonsense conversation. Mm-hmm. If you've got a really fucking great CD player, use your really great CD player. If you've got a really great record player, use your really great record player. Or if you've got a really great streamer, use your really great streamer. You know, if you've got a £500 record player, it's going to sound pretty good. But if you've got a £2,000 CD player, it's going to sound better. It's just a fucking scientific fact. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of it's in the beholder, and just like my system isn't very good for records, but it's got a warmth about it. I like the crackle. I like it's not hi-fi in the slightest. Just something nice about it. But what to analyse, just get really close to music. I'd maybe put good headphones on and listen to CD or something like that.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I mean, it doesn't really matter, you know, but I suppose I'm just being kind of contrarian, maybe.
You make a good point. I mean, people spending £100,000 on vinyl does seem a bit crazy, doesn't it?
If that's how you get your rocks off, that's fine. Do you know what I mean? But I'd rather spend it on hats. That's personal. I enjoy buying hats more than I enjoy buying records.
Putting a 40 grand mortgage on your house to store your hats is just as crazy, isn't it?
I know.
Probably. I'm kind of, I pathologically don't like stuff though. You just come back to Alex. I inherited a lot of Alex's stuff, you know, and I've just spent all my time trying to get rid of it because I don't want it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I got his guitar. I was like, what the fuck have I get this guitar for? I'm never going to play it, ever. So I gave it away.
C35?
No, it was his red Les Paul that he played with Big Star.
Oh.
If you got his Wikipedia page, he's playing a Les Paul Jr.
Mm.
I just used to give it to people and it would do the rounds and I would always forget who had it. And my mate Barry would phone up and go, but you can't do that. It's like rock and roll history. And I'm like, it's a guitar. It's a guitar. And then he was like, well, why don't I buy you a brand new one and you give me that one and then I'll look after it and I'll preserve it. And I'm like, oh, it's a fucking guitar. It's meant to be played, and if it gets lost, it gets lost. If it gets broken, it gets broken. I don't care. It's not important. And it's not important, you know.
No.
And I kind of like the idea that this guitar just kind of floats around, you know.
Yeah.
Because one day nobody's going to care.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter, you know. It's just a fucking guitar, and guitars should get played.
Jason, what can I say? It's been absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing with us your lovely stories and life.
Thanks for giving me my starting show business.
At last, it had to happen at some point. So, you know, no problem. You're welcome.
And I know that this time next year, when we can all be in a room together, that there's enough stories that haven't been told today for a part 2.
Oh, yeah. A lot more stories. A lot of things I wanted to ask you, actually, especially the bees story. We'll get round to that sometime, hopefully.
Yeah. There's a funny bit to that story, I'll tell you one day. But it's for another time.
Brilliant.